me bring up a man who has become as close to an institution as anybody I know, Donald Davis.
When I was a little boy growing up in North Carolina, now let's get the time right. This is when Coca-Colas were a nickel. The way they had always been. When I was a little boy growing up there in North Carolina, there were a lot of things that had not been invented. One of those things was called self-esteem. And since self-esteem had not been invented, it did not need to be taken care of. So when we got in trouble at home, do you think we got put in time out? Oh, no. Time out would have just been a nice, quiet place where you could think up more trouble to get into. When we got in trouble at home, do you think we got grounded? No. When we got in trouble at home, we got a flat-out, uncaged, free-range whooping. But at school, it was different. At school, you got a paddling. Now, here's the legal difference. If you got a paddling at school, the teacher could later stand up and truthfully swear in court, "I did not lay a finger on that child. The paddle did it." But every teacher I had in North Carolina public schools taught with the assistance of a paddle. In the first grade, I was in Miss Annie Ledbetter's room. Miss Annie Ledbetter taught with the aid of a flyback paddle. The flyback paddles were made for the teaching profession by the Flyback Toy Corporation in High Point, North Carolina. And they came disguised as toys. They were red wooden paddles, but on one side there was the end of a long rubber band stapled into the paddle. On the other end of it, a little round rubber ball. You'd get that and you'd play with it, chunky, trying to knock it back the other way before it hit you in the head. Little Eddie Curtis got one of those for his birthday. He slipped it in his book bag and brought it to school with him. When she turned around to write on the board, back in the back of the room, Eddie got that little flyback paddle out, and he was playing with it. Chuggity. She finished writing. He did not see her coming. She slipped up behind him, lifted that paddle out of his hand, popped the rubber band off of it, and recycled it on the spot. And for the rest of her teaching career, that paddle slept on her desk, ready to sit up when it heard the right tone of voice. But even right there in the first grade, we learned that most of us didn't have much to worry about. Because, see, the way the world was made back then, every class of kids had installed within it about 2 or 3 designated paddlees whose job in life was to get paddled for the rest of us. And in our class, which was the A's through the GRs, our designated paddlees were Tommy Connard, his cousin Aldine, they were already genetically related, and this wispy, tall, skinny, wispy little boy named Lynn Fowler. I have to tell you about poor Lynn Fowler. Lynn Fowler was the 7th boy in his family, 7 boys. They lived on a little creek side over there behind the school. And every year, all 7 of those boys, even though we only had 6 grades at Hazelwood School, not just one year, but every year, all 7 of those boys would start the year at Hazelwood School. And then as the year rolled along, one at a time, they would gradually disappear. And we would hear the whispered mythology. Another one of the Fowlers has been transported to a mythical land called the Stonewall Jackson Training School. where they would be put in a big pot with other evil boys from all over North Carolina, where they would spend the rest of the year exchanging evil information with each other and be a whole lot worse when they got back home than they were when they were sent there. Now, that was a dumb thing to do, wasn't it? Well, every day Miss Annie Ledbetter would paddle one of those boys. She'd paddle Tommy on Monday. She'd paddle Aldine on Tuesday. She'd paddle Lynn on Wednesday. She'd go back to Tommy on Thursday. On Friday, she'd just paddle all three of them because we're going to miss 2 days, and she knew they needed it anyway. Well, we finished Hazelwood School, and the same group of kids, A through the GR, Charlotte Abernathy through Lady Ruth Green, the same group of kids moved right on up to old, that was her first name, old Miss Lois Harrell's room. That woman was profoundly old. She told us that she had taught second grade 188 years. And that was after she had tried out all the other grades to find out where she really belonged. She was so old, she existed on the outer fringes of total dehydration. The only thing that kept her on the face of the earth was a great big jug of Jergens lotion that she would rub into herself all the time, try to keep her wrinkles swelled up enough that the wind couldn't catch her by the wrinkles and blow her to Buncombe County. Oh, old Miss Lois Harrell had the one and only, world's one and only electric paddles. It had been invented and made for her by her boyfriend, Harry. In another geological era, Harry had been slated to marry Miss Lois Harrell. But before the wedding time arrived, the First World War broke out. And Harry signed up to go fight Germans. And in about 2 months, he discovered the fighting Germans was a whole lot better deal than marrying Miss Lois Harrell. So he just kept signing up, signing up, signing up, signing up. He stayed in the Army through 2.5 wars. By the time he finally got out, it was too late to get married. But every night, she would fix dinner for the two of them. He would go over to her house. They would sit on opposite sides of the table and eat dinner together. And then he would dry the dishes while she washed them and go home and sleep at his own house where it was safe. I figured out way later that what he had done was he had taken a 3/4-inch poplar board, sawed out the shape of a paddle, painted it red, but on one side there was this kind of white logo like what used to pop up when you're watching Batman on television. And then he had drilled a hole in the handle, glued a big wire up in there, and put a plug on the other end of that wire. And that paddle would sit on her desk with its tail all curled up. And she'd pick it up, and that wire would uncoil. And she would say, "I'm going to be merciful today, boys and girls, and use it by hand. But if you continue to behave this way, I will be forced to plug it in." And we heard stories from 5th graders about the year she had plugged it in, and a little child had melted down into the surface of the earth and out, even leaving grease on the ground, and his parents never remembered they had him. We got way up in the spring of the year, and one day Miss Lois decided it was time to paddle Tommy. He was already bent over the desk, and she picked up that paddle, but she had just put a big glob of Jergens lotion on her hands, and it hadn't all soaked in yet. And she started in with that paddle, and about the time she hit 78 RPM, it just squirted, shook, right out of her hand. And it went flying across through the room, dragging its tail behind it. And it hit the upper pane of that big double-pane schoolhouse window, and the glass just shattered. and the paddle went out the window and landed on the sidewalk just as Mr. Bowles, the superintendent, was coming to see our principal, Mr. Leatherwood. The whole day changed after that. In about 5 minutes, Miss Lois was called out, and we had an instant substitute for the rest of the day. Haskell Davis, the janitor, who told us wonderful stories about blood, boogers, and throw up. Well, finally the bell rang and we went home. Forgot all about that. Next day we got to school, and as soon as we got there, Miss Lois said, "Oh, boys and girls, we did not know this ahead of time. We had just now learned about it. We're going to have a total school assembly. We need to go to the auditorium right now." We thought, well, wonder what this is about. We got up and we all marched into the auditorium, got in our little second grade section, and up on the stage was both Mr. Leatherwood, our principal, and Mr. Bowles, the superintendent. They got up and they started explaining things to us, and Mr. Bowles told us that the afternoon before, imagine this timing, the afternoon before, they had had a special teacher workshop on discipline. And there would be no more paddling at Hazelwood School. About 2 or 3 kids in every room applauded. Rest of us just thought we had lost our entertainment. And they went on to explain that there had been a new thing invented that they were doing at schools all over the country, and they were going to now try it out at Hazelwood School. It was a new invention that was called getting suspended. And from now on, instead of being paddled, you were going to get suspended. Now, there were 2 levels. There was the misdemeanor level and the felony level. Mr. Leatherwood, our principal, explained the misdemeanor level. It was a whole bunch of little things that weren't really awfully that bad. But if you did any of those things, you were going to get what was called suspended in school, where you'd be put in a room with all the other kids suspended in the school, and you'd all be suspended in there together with a teacher watching. And then Mr. Bowles explained the felony level. It was bad. It was things like fighting on the school bus with the driver, or stealing lunch money, or changing grades on your report card if you made them better. Or calling a teacher the same thing you'd already heard your parents call them. Oh. If you did any of those things, you were going to be flat suspended right out of school, all on your own. And then the assembly was over. And we got up and we went back to our room, and once we got in there, Miss Lois said, "Now, boys and girls, did you understand everything about that assembly we just went to?" We said, "Yes, ma'am. No more paddling." She said, "That is correct, but you are still evil. And from now on, you're going to get suspended." And I have an idea some of you are going to be suspended who never have had a paddling. Do any of you have one single question about that? We all looked at Eddie Curtis. We loved Eddie. Eddie was the person who would always ask the question about the things we wanted to know about, but we were ashamed to ask. And he raised his hand immediately. And Miss Lois said, "Eddie, do you have a question?" He said, "Yes, ma'am." "What does suspended mean?" Because we'd all been thinking they'd worn that word out for an hour and never had told us what they were actually talking about. Well, being a good second grade teacher, Miss Lois did not answer the question. No, you know what she said, don't you? Go look it up. Didn't you hate that? You don't know how to spell a word. How you going to look it up if you didn't know how to spell it to start with? I remember spending a whole day hung up between C and K trying to find ketchup in the dictionary. I never did find it in there. And Eddie got up and he started walking over to this big 35-pound maroon color New Century Dictionary. She'd brought that thing home in sections a month at a time from the A&P store. Finally, it was all bolted together. And he started going through that. C, D, E, F, Q, R, S, S, P, Q, S, U, S, U, S. S-U-S. All of a sudden, his back went stiff and his eyes rolled back and he hollered, Jesus, Joseph, and Mary, they're going to hang us. If you're just a little bit bad, they're going to put you in the room with everybody that's a little bit bad, and they're going to hang everybody together with a teacher watching. And if you're real bad, they're going to drag you outside and hang you all by yourself. No, 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 no. 2 days later, in the Waynesville Mountaineer, little twice-a-week county seat newspaper, the following headline appeared on the bottom half of the front page. It said, 28 second graders petition school board to reestablish paddling as their preferred form of punishment.